What if I told you that the number of years Star Citizen has spent in development isn't nearly as important as some people would like to think it is? Because having a conversation on the internet about a polarizing issue always goes well. So let's do that. It doesn't matter the topic of conversation. When it comes to Star Citizen, you don't have to scroll too far to find comments that look like this. In essence, there's some variation of how spending 10 years and $350 million on development is a sure sign the whole thing's doomed. It's repeated so often now that no matter how much some people want to believe otherwise, it's not a concern we can dismiss out of hand. Part of the core of this point of view is the sunk cost fallacy, which means people just continue with something because we've already spent money on it, despite it leaving us unhappy, worse off, or otherwise just being pointless. It's kind of like getting massively discounted gig tickets, only to find out that the only hotel available in the area is the most expensive one, then having to get a flight because your car breaks down. There comes a point where you just need to cut your losses and accept that it's no longer worth it. And there's a long period of Star Citizen's history where it would be easy to argue that. Before we were able to rent or buy ships with in-game currency, if you had a starter package and you wanted to do trading or experience bigger missions or multi-crew gameplay, your only option was splash some cash or rely on the generosity of strangers. And if this is you and how you feel about Star Citizen, then just stop spending money. But where the idea of the sunk cost fallacy falls down is for people like myself and the backers for whom it's not so obvious that we're worse off. If we're enjoying the game, enjoying the ships that we've bought, it's no longer a fallacy. But that statement, 10 years and 350 million in the hole, is not a ringing endorsement of, well, anything. But it's not much more than a surface analysis either. I know it's pretty much standard now for Star Citizen to be compared to Red Dead Redemption 2, but I'm still going to use it because there's so much info available on Red Dead 2's development cost, time and studio that it's easy to make a comparison and draw accurate parallels. We know that Red Dead 2's development started prior to the original game's release back in 2010. But as the sequel was released in 2018, let's just call it an even 8 years in development. Red Dead's developer, Rockstar, confirmed through one of its producers that over 1,600 people from the studio and 400 external staff worked on the game. Seeing as I can't seem to find numbers from CIG about how many external staff they have working on Star Citizen, we'll leave them aside. This graph shows the number of staff CIG has in total up to 2019. You actually need to take the first number of each bar because that's the number of development staff, not like HR and front of house and marketing, etc. In 2019, CIG had 468, less than a third of Rockstar's numbers. And here's the important conclusion. If Rockstar only had 468 staff working on Red Dead Redemption 2, it would have taken them over 24 years to get that game out as it is today. That's a release date of 2034. Why? Because if you have only a third of the staff, it's going to take you 3 times as long to do the same work. Rockstar's 1,600 devs, working 37 hours a week each, tops out at over 3 million hours a year if you don't give anyone any holiday. If you tried to do that with 468 devs, that's 126 hours a week, or 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you want to get ridiculous and try that with the 10 devs CIG had back in 2012, 845 hours a day. So, yeah, not even possible. Because projects aren't managed solely in terms of years, they're measured primarily in terms of man-hours, which is precisely why I said right at the start, the number of years in development isn't as important as you might think. I mean, I haven't even mentioned yet that CIG wasn't an established studio back in 2012. They were working out of a basement, having to build the company from the ground up at the same time as starting development. They didn't have 468 devs every year. They started with 10. And yes, they will have more in 2021 now, and we don't know what they had in 2020 because we haven't had the financial report yet, but I can guarantee it's not going to be the 1,600 staff that Rockstar had. Now, if you believe that 10 years is far too long a time for any game to spend in development, regardless of the reason, that's completely reasonable, completely support you on that. But if you think that CIG should have achieved something close to completion in the time that they've had available, that just isn't realistic, given how much more ambitious Star Citizen is to the game that we've compared it to. It's not realistic at all. A sensible question then would be, well, if the equation's that simple, why the hell didn't CIG just hire a bunch more devs and get on with the game? The answer to that is in how it's funded. Conventional crowdfunding gives us a finite pot of money. When our campaign is over, the money we have is what we have to work with. It defines everything: the size of the studio, the scope of the project, and how long you can push things until, well, you need to release the game. No one predicted the crowdfunding success of Star Citizen, so when they started out, they had all of this in mind. A smaller studio, smaller staff, smaller aspirations, because they were expecting their crowdfunding to dry up. But as things entered the third year of development, it became clear to CIG that their crowdfunding wasn't slowing down. It was doing the exact opposite. And from a business perspective, this changes everything. Absolutely everything. Now, it's not crowdfunding in the conventional sense. Now it's a revenue stream that redefines studio size, project aspirations, that's feature creep to you and me, and the project's timescale. And this is exactly what we've seen at CIG over the past decade. When you add in the very public statements from Chris Roberts that he's building the game he wants to play and that the finished products will not be released until they are ready, they've practically been obligated to develop the game the way they've been doing it for the length of time they have. Now, of course, people are going to disagree. Some people are going to think that 10 years is just too long. And that's absolutely fine. I'm not trying to say that you can't think it's too long. I'm trying to say that 10 years isn't enough when you look at how few staff they've had, it's just not being realistic. And neither are the fears of it imploding. That's just not supported by the numbers. Star Citizen took in more cash in 2020 than any year previous. There are more active users per day and month, and more cumulative playtime than there ever has been before. Of course, this doesn't mean that everything's rosy, because it isn't. That feature creep is an issue, and the pace of development isn't right yet. I will, in the future at some point, talk about the things that I think CIG need to improve on and some of the concerns I have about the project. But when I released the What Happens If Star Citizen Fails video last week, I kind of intended that to be just one video that I left alone, but so many of these comments popped up that I felt I had to respond to them. So just for the moment, I'm pretty much done with Star Citizen drama. It's not an area I intend on covering too deeply, so I'm going to focus on 3.13 content and the videos that bring my naval experience to bear on the game. And if that interests you, episode 3 of my Starships and Warships series went live just last weekend. You've been watching Drinkers with Gaming Problems. Thank you very much for stopping by. I'll see you soon.